and I'm here on behalf of the Longview MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization for the Greater Longview area, to update you on the WalkBike Plan for Longview, Gladewater, and White Oak. This plan serves as a guide for planning bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure facility improvements throughout the Greater Longview area, and I'm really excited to tell you today about how the plan is ending up and the recommendations that are included within it. So I have a brief presentation to give to you to tell you a little bit more. First off, answering the question of why should we invest in walking and biking. There are a lot of really good reasons, the first of which is economic. People that bike and walk on average spend similar or even greater amounts on retail purchases than people that are using their automobiles to access local shops and businesses and restaurants. For example, in Dallas, Texas, there's been a significant increase in retail sales along streets that have bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. And they really see it as a statement to the rest of the city that this part of Dallas is really a different part of town. It's a place where there is a creative class influx, and there's a lot more economic activity happening there than there was 5 years ago. As far as residential development goes, research and surveys that have been performed across the country by the National Association of Realtors and the Urban Land Institute has found that people really do want to live in places where they have options to walk and bike. In fact, 52% of people said they would like to live in a place where they don't have to use a car if they would rather not do it. So there's an economic case there. And then finally, property values also can be greatly increased when bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure is put into place near residential areas. In Minneapolis, one particular trail development sparked $200 million in residential development. So you can see there's a great opportunity there. Home values that are in proximity to bicycle and pedestrian trails tend to have significantly higher property values as well for every quarter mile that they're closer to those locations. There are also health benefits, obviously. Obesity is lower in places where people use active transportation, where they walk and bike to get to where they need to go, and where people walk and bike for recreational and health purposes as well. This chart just shows the relationship between obesity and places where people walk and bike and use transit. And places like the Netherlands and Switzerland and Denmark have really low rates of obesity, and people walk and bike a lot. The United States is on the opposite end of the scale, and this plan and making these improvements to walking and biking is one step that we can take to get us to a place where we have better health in our community. So I'm excited to tell you about the plan and the recommendations that it includes. First, what's the purpose of this project? I mentioned briefly earlier that it's looking at recommendations for infrastructure, but we start off by analyzing where people bike and walk and run today. We look at safety of trails and of streets that are out there right now, and we define a network for people to bike and walk along for transportation and recreation use. The recommendations that come out of this plan are prioritized into a list of projects with cost estimates so that we can make our investments and have the greatest return on the investment that we make. And the end goal is to become a more walkable and bicycle-friendly community. This is really intended to be a plan for everyone. It's a plan for people biking, it's a plan for people walking, it's a plan for people that are biking or walking to get to transit, and it's also in many ways a plan for people driving as well so that we can have spaces for all of our transportation users to exist safely. There's a lot of different types of people that bike. There are the very avid road cyclists, there are also children that bike to get to school and everybody in between. There are a lot of different people that walk. There may be very avid runners that like to go out and jog. There are people that walk for transportation purposes to get to their bus, and there are also people with disabilities that walk or use some sort of mobility device to access their destinations and where they need to go. And this plan is really meant to be for everyone. We've had a really good, really solid amount of public engagement on this project. In September of 2017, we held 2 open houses in different parts of the area and had good turnout at both of those. At those meetings, we had maps of the region and asked people to indicate where they want to be able to walk and bike to and from, where there are problem areas, good connections they would like to see in the community. We also had listening sessions with different community groups, including students and staff from LeTourneau University. We had an online crowdsource mapping where people from the comfort of their own homes were able to go onto a map and indicate by putting down points or drawing lines where there are problem areas or good opportunities or connections that need to be made. And then finally, we had an online survey, and we had a phenomenal turnout for that with 1,774 people responding, which is really great. And this was all very good information for us. It told us what the community wants to see in the future and what the priorities are from the people that were involved in helping to shape this plan. From all of that input, we developed a set of goals. You can see that the goals are fairly lengthy, but I'll hit on the highlights of those. First and foremost is that we want the plan to result in safety. We want to have safe places for people of all ages and abilities to walk and bike. We want to make sure that our trails and our sidewalks and our bikeways are continuous and connected to each other, so we don't just have a trail to nowhere, but it takes you to a place that you want to go. We want to make sure that we're prioritizing new investments in places where people want to go and where people need to go right now. And we also want to make sure that we're having equity associated in with the recommendations, so that we're giving people equal opportunities to access the transportation system and the recreational trail system as well. Public investments in infrastructure should have benefits that exceed their costs, and so we've really made sure that the recommendations are those that give you the most bang for your buck. And then finally, we want to make sure that the biking and walking plan and the biking and walking systems are well integrated with other modes, and especially transit, which is an important element of the transportation system in the area. The plan has 4 major components. The first is an assessment of conditions. We looked at a lot of data and talked with the community to figure out where is it that people are most likely to walk and bike and where do people want to go. We also asked people and used the data to find out where there are gaps in the system right now, where there are gaps in the sidewalks or gaps in the trails or gaps in safe streets for biking. And then where are those safety concerns? And we use that information to start to develop a network of needs. We then have recommendations for policies and programs. This may be changes to municipal ordinances. It may also include things like education programs to help people know how to more safely use the trail system and the sidewalk system and biking on street. We have obviously infrastructure recommendations, which are really the heart of the plan. We have infrastructure recommendations both for walking and for biking. And then finally, implementation is a critical part of this plan. We have cost estimates developed for every single project that's recommended, and we have a robust prioritization method that folds in those various elements that we learned from the community, that we learned in our analysis. That all goes into the prioritization system. For the biking infrastructure recommendations, we have essentially 2 major components. We have a priority network that we've divided into 2 tiers. These are the highest priority infrastructure recommendations for bicycling infrastructure. And then we have a future network, things that can happen beyond the life of this plan, things that can happen if we have the opportunity. So for example, if a new street is going to be built or a street reconstructed, we can look to this plan and see what's the most appropriate type of bicycling infrastructure to include. Similarly, for walking, we have 2 major components of the infrastructure recommendations, a priority network, again, 2 tiers, and then the future network, which is looking beyond the lifespan of this plan. These recommendations include all sorts of different types of bicycle and pedestrian improvements, from standard bike lanes and buffered bike lanes that just provide a little bit more space, a little bit more separation from motor vehicle traffic, to paved shoulders, which are going to be more on the rural roadways. They provide a great opportunity for people that are a little bit more avid and like to bike longer distances. Trails are a critical part of this plan as well. We're really focusing on building onto the existing trail network that's in place today and closing the gaps within that trail system. Bike boulevards are an exciting opportunity on very low traffic, low speed streets to provide some very cost-effective improvements that can make the street more comfortable for biking. And it may just be a little sign or pavement marking here and there, a few signs and so forth to make it more comfortable for people biking. Signed bike routes are another opportunity on some lower traffic, predominantly rural or semi-rural roadways. And then finally, sidewalks, of course, are a critical part of this plan and are a major element within the pedestrian infrastructure recommendations. There are a lot of different ways that these recommendations can be implemented, and one of the biggest opportunities in Longview is a concept known as a road diet. It essentially is a reconfiguration of a roadway. This is an example of where you can take a 4-lane street and through restriping you can make it 1 lane in each direction and put in a center 2-way left turn lane. What this does is it gives you space for bike lanes. It may give you space to build sidewalks into what used to be roadway. It also has significant safety benefits for everyone involved. Streets that have a center turn lane tend to have far fewer motor vehicle crashes, fewer head-on collisions, fewer rear-ending collisions, and they also can operate much more efficiently than a standard street because it gives you a safe place to pull out to make a left turn if you're driving. This is just one example of how the elements, the recommendations of this plan can be implemented in a really cost-effective manner. Here's a photo rendering of what that could look like. Here is an existing 4-lane street in the area. And here's what it could look like simply with pavement restriping. We've planted a few trees in this as well, just to make the picture look a little bit prettier, but you can see there's now space for people biking, there's space for people walking, and there's space for people driving as well. How are we prioritizing the projects? Well, we're really focusing on 4 major elements in our prioritization. The first is improved safety. Everything that we're recommending is intended to make it safer for people walking, biking, using transit, and driving. We also are looking at demand. Where are people most likely to walk and bike? And I mentioned earlier we performed an analysis for this, and we used various factors to see where people are most likely to walk and bike. This map is an indication of some of those hotspots. The third is connectivity. We want to prioritize things that connect to the existing trail system, that connect to existing sidewalks, and that connect to existing bike lanes so that we're forming a connected network. And then finally, it's really important for us to look at the project cost per mile, which is a measure of return on investment. Not to say that we only are going to do the cheapest projects, but we want to make sure that we're getting every ounce out of our dollars that we're spending on infrastructure within the area. That's it for my formal presentation, but I really want to thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit more about the WalkBike Plan for Longview, Gladewater, and White Oak. For more information, please visit the website at longviewtexas.gov/walkbike, or feel free to send an email to mpo@longviewtexas.gov. Thank you.